the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can.
This wasn't how Jimmy Kimmel expected to wake up. For 2 decades, he was a fixture of late-night television, cracking jokes and hosting A-listers under the bright lights of the Hollywood spotlight. But overnight, the news spread like wildfire. Disney had quietly pulled the plug on Kimmel's show. There was no farewell episode, no standing ovation, no final joke, just silence. And now, for the first time, Jimmy Kimmel is breaking that silence. In a short but emotionally loaded statement, he didn't lash out. He didn't blame politics. Instead, what he said felt deeper, more personal. The message he gave to Disney was sharp, reflective, and hauntingly honest. Fans across the country are still trying to make sense of it. Why now? What pushed Disney to sever ties with one of their longest-standing late-night voices? What Kimmel reveals next might change how we see late-night television forever. It began with a monologue, not a joke, but a statement that cut through the usual late-night banter. On September 15, 2025, Jimmy Kimmel devoted his opening segment to the tragic assassination of activist Charlie Kirk. He didn't hold back. With characteristic sarcasm and sharp delivery, he criticized those who rushed to frame the tragedy for political gain. Kimmel mimicked one reaction, a camera panning to a political figure expressing exaggerated grief, and punctuated his act with a quiet, devastating line. "This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish." It wasn't just a barb, it was a cultural pinch point. Within hours, anger spiked on social media. Newsrooms buzzed, local stations felt the pressure. Nexstar, which owns dozens of ABC-affiliated stations, pulled the show from their lineups. They called his remarks offensive and missing community values. The network stationery became a battlefield. That same day, the FCC chair, the nation's regulator for broadcast licenses, publicly condemned Kimmel. He demanded action. The implicit threat was clear. Networks could risk their licenses by allowing content deemed out of bounds. Suddenly, Dancing with Controversy had consequences. By midday Wednesday, ABC released a statement no one expected. Jimmy Kimmel Live will be preempted indefinitely. No explanation, no warning, just pulled. Jimmy, who had joked through awkward dinners with celebrities and tackled world headlines with laughter, found himself silenced. The atmosphere was electric. One moment, late-night television was a space for escaping tension. The next, it became the stage for a showdown between creative freedom and corporate caution. Kimmel's team scrambled. Staff whispered, "This can't be happening." The studio lights that had always meant showtime now felt like a spotlight turned harsh. The greatest question of the hour: would Jimmy ever return to that desk? Backstage at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, the dressing room lights buzzed faintly. But the air felt still, almost heavy. After 20 years on the air, Jimmy Kimmel's nightly routine had become second nature. The same walk from his car. The same rhythm in his voice when he greeted the crew. But on that day, something had broken the spell. His nameplate still glistened under the soft light, but the door to his studio was locked. Jimmy didn't record a monologue that night. Instead, he sat with his longtime executive producer, hands clasped together, staring into the carpet. "We knew the show would end one day," he muttered, "but not like this." There was no live audience, no cue cards, no camera rehearsal, just the sound of text messages pinging. A mix of support and confusion from friends, fellow late-night hosts, and Hollywood insiders. Stephen Colbert reportedly called within minutes. Seth Meyers sent a voice memo saying, "If they can yank you, we're all exposed." Even Howard Stern, who had clashed with Kimmel in the past, left a voicemail. "You don't deserve this, man." But Jimmy wasn't looking for sympathy. He was trying to process what it meant. Was it about the joke? Or had he become a symbol of something bigger? Something he never signed up for? Insiders close to ABC began to whisper, not in emails, but in person, face to face, like it was the 1990s again. They said pressure had come down not just from Nexstar or advertisers, but from above, way above. The kind of boardroom pressure where names are never written down. Disney execs, while silent in public, were holding private meetings that night. Everyone wanted distance from controversy. And Jimmy. Jimmy was the nearest flame. His staff sat huddled around laptops, reading angry headlines, drafting possible statements, trying to craft a message that could walk the tightrope, protect Jimmy, preserve the network, and avoid adding fuel to a national fire. But nothing sounded right. Because what do you say when everything you built, every joke, every interview, every moment of laughter, gets erased with a single decision? Jimmy looked up and said one thing. "They don't know me like they think they do, but they're about to." And with that, the silence broke. The next move would be his, not the network's. For 2 days, Jimmy Kimmel said nothing. His name trended across every social platform. Speculation ran wild. Fans, critics, journalists, everyone filled the silence with their own theories. But the man himself remained quiet. Until a Sunday evening. No press release, no publicist-written apology. Just Jimmy, sitting alone at his desk at home, wearing a vintage Dodgers cap and a faded t-shirt, with the camera on his phone pointed directly at him. He looked tired, not defeated, but reflective. And then he spoke. "I've been off the air for the first time in 21 years. Not because I'm sick, not because I'm retiring, but because I was asked to step aside. I didn't agree with that decision. I still don't." The video was barely 4 minutes long. There was no music, no fancy graphics. Just Jimmy. Raw. Honest. A little shaken, but unflinching. "I want to say this loud and clear. I have no bitterness. I love my crew. I love my writers. I love my family at ABC. But I also believe in comedy, in satire, in telling uncomfortable truths. If you take that away from late night, what's left? It was never a rant, never a meltdown. Just a man trying to understand how something he built for 2 decades could be paused so suddenly. The reaction was instant. Within minutes, the video was reposted by dozens of celebrities. Jennifer Aniston, Steve Martin, Ben Stiller, even Ellen DeGeneres, who knows a thing or two about being suddenly taken off the air, reposted the clip with the caption, "This is how you speak your truth without hate." Former guests from all walks of life, actors, musicians, athletes, began sharing their memories of being on Kimmel's show. Moments of laughter. Serious conversations. Tributes he gave to fallen icons. The time he cried while honoring his newborn son's heart surgery. The time he broke down talking about Las Vegas after the mass shooting. Jimmy wasn't just a host to them. He was a constant in a chaotic world. By the end of the night, hashtags like "Prantakanj Stand with Kimmel" and "Chatter Let Jimmy Speak" climbed to the top of trending charts. But perhaps the most surprising endorsement came from behind the scenes. An anonymous Disney board member reportedly called his statement classy, while also warning colleagues that the fallout was worse than expected. Jimmy hadn't declared war. He hadn't accused anyone by name. All he did was speak as a human being. And in an industry full of polished PR spins and rehearsed statements, that was the most revolutionary thing he could have done. When Jimmy Kimmel posted his video, No one knew what would happen next. But what followed wasn't a ripple. It was a tidal wave. Because for 2 decades, Kimmel had shared the stage of late-night television with some of the most recognizable names in the business. Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers. Even newer voices like John Oliver and Trevor Noah, though no longer behind the desk, still carried weight in comedy circles. And one by one, they reacted. Fallon went first, not with a fiery monologue, but with a quiet nod during his opening. He simply said, "To my friend Jimmy, we miss you already. This chair doesn't feel right without yours nearby." Stephen Colbert, never one to avoid serious tones, went deeper. "There's a lot I can't say, legally, but I will say this. Late night is about laughter, yes, but it's also about truth. And the moment truth feels like a liability, we all need to ask what kind of world we're building." The audience fell silent. No punchline followed. Suddenly, it wasn't just Jimmy Kimmel's absence being discussed. It was the future of comedy, of satire, of commentary. Behind the scenes, showrunners and writers held tense meetings. What words were safe? Were certain jokes off limits now? How much of their voice was really their own? Even Jon Stewart, who had largely stepped back from late night for years, was reportedly deeply disturbed by what had happened. Sources close to him said he reached out to Kimmel privately, calling the suspension a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Jimmy's longtime colleagues, Guillermo, Cleto, the writing team, all posted cryptic messages online. Some shared old photos. Others simply posted broken heart emojis. But the loudest silence came from Disney. They said, nothing. No follow-up, no clarification, no explanation, just a void. And the longer that silence stretched, the more the public began to fill it with their own conclusions. Was Kimmel punished for a joke? For criticizing something? Or was this about money, ratings, contracts? Some speculated it had nothing to do with controversy and everything to do with quiet restructuring within Disney's TV division. Others believed a larger culture shift was happening, one where comedy would become less spontaneous and more scripted, less fearless, and more focus-grouped. Whatever the reason, people were watching closely. And Jimmy Kimmel? He hadn't said another word since that original video, but the aftershock of his removal had already begun to shake the entire foundation of entertainment. What started as one man losing his show was beginning to look like the unraveling of late-night television itself. Something unexpected happened after Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air. The people watching from home stopped being quiet. It started small. A few comments under old Jimmy Kimmel Live clips on YouTube asking, "Where's Jimmy?" Then, tweets with the hashtag #BringBackKimmel started popping up. But within 48 hours, it exploded. It wasn't just fans. It was people who hadn't watched late night in years. Grandparents who remembered Kimmel's jokes during the Bush years. Gen Z kids who grew up seeing Guillermo as a meme. Mothers and fathers who turned on Kimmel to laugh after a hard day's work. Suddenly, they all had something to say. One viewer posted, "I don't care what politics you believe in. You don't just silence a man with 20 years of laughter behind him." Another wrote, "He got us through COVID, through hard years. You don't erase that because of corporate cold feet." It became clear. For many people, this wasn't just about a TV host. It was about trust, comfort, familiarity. People had welcomed Jimmy into their homes every night. And now he was gone, with no real explanation. Petitions started surfacing. One Change.org petition reached over 400,000 signatures in 5 days. Reddit threads analyzing every second of Kimmel's final episode shot to the top of the homepage. TikToks flooded in, some emotional, others comedic, but all asking the same thing. What happened to Jimmy? Some fans went a step further, staging a peaceful demonstration outside the ABC building in Los Angeles. Not a riot, no screaming. Just a group of people holding signs that read, "Late night needs Jimmy. Comedy is not a crime. Silence isn't golden." Online, creators began producing their own Kimmel-style monologues, filling the void left behind, mimicking his cadence, style, even his laugh, almost like a form of protest. What made this moment different was the unity. People who disagreed on almost everything agreed on this. Whether they liked Jimmy's humor or not, many were disturbed by the idea that someone so long-standing, so trusted, could be pulled from the air without context or conversation. And Disney's silence made it worse. Because when the people speak up and no one answers, they just get louder. The question now was simple. Would anyone at the top listen? After the public rallied behind Jimmy Kimmel, it didn't take long for the comedy world to follow. In fact, many comedians, even those who didn't always agree with Kimmel's brand of humor, felt this moment was bigger than just him. It was about comedy, about voice, about whether comedians were still allowed to take risks, or whether they were becoming the next endangered species. Late-night hosts like Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers opened their next episodes with carefully chosen words. Colbert said, "Jimmy and I don't always walk the same path, but when one of us is silenced, all of us feel it." Seth Meyers delivered a rare, somber moment, calling Kimmel a cornerstone of modern comedy, and warning viewers, if someone who's been doing this for decades can be taken off the air with zero transparency, what message does that send to the next generation of comics? Across the Atlantic, British comedians like Ricky Gervais chimed in, expressing worry over where the line is being drawn. "I don't care what joke it was. If people are laughing, then it's a joke. And if it's not allowed to be said anymore, then it's propaganda, not entertainment." Even comedians with vastly different styles, from Dave Chappelle to Ali Wong to Tim Dillon, took to podcasts and interviews to echo a similar sentiment. Whether or not you liked Kimmel, this moment felt like a warning shot. The stand-up scene in New York and Los Angeles became electric. Underground shows added lines like "Free Jimmy" to their set lists. Comics were riffing on it in real time. At the Laugh Factory, one performer walked on stage and simply said, "I was gonna tell jokes tonight." But apparently, that's a luxury now. The audience roared, not with laughter, but recognition. In comedy clubs across the country, people were no longer just there to laugh. They were listening differently. There was a sense that something sacred was at stake, that the right to laugh at the absurdities of life, politics, celebrity, and culture was being encroached on. And the fear wasn't just for Jimmy, it was for what he represented. The last era of unscripted honesty on television. A man who poked fun at everyone, who could mock a celebrity on Monday and roast a senator on Tuesday. That kind of balance, that kind of comedic trust, was becoming rare. As comics of all generations began to share their thoughts, from older legends like Steve Martin to newer voices like Hassan Minhaj, the message was unified. We can't let laughter become regulated. What started as a single name being removed from a show was now becoming a symbol of a much deeper struggle. Not just about Jimmy Kimmel, but about the future of comedy itself. As the dust settled around Jimmy Kimmel's abrupt disappearance from late-night television, another storm was beginning to brew. This time, from inside the walls of Disney itself. It started subtly. A few anonymous posts on entertainment forums, a leaked memo here. A blind item there. But slowly, a pattern emerged. People who had worked at Disney, or with Kimmel, began to speak out, hinting at deeper fractures between the star comedian and the media giant that owned his show. One former Disney executive, who asked to remain unnamed, revealed that tension between Kimmel and the company had been brewing for years, not over politics, not over content, but over control. Jimmy wanted to push boundaries. Disney wanted guardrails. That worked in 2010. It doesn't work in 2025. Insiders claimed that internal meetings grew increasingly strained over the last 18 months. Kimmel reportedly pushed back on certain segments being watered down or removed entirely from final broadcasts. There were whispers that Disney had grown increasingly cautious about anything that might offend anyone, anywhere, even at the cost of authenticity. One former writer recalled a chilling moment in the writer's room. "We wrote a sketch about AI replacing actors. Totally goofy, nothing political. But it was pulled last minute because Disney had a partnership deal with a tech company we didn't even know about. Jimmy lost it. Said if comedy had to pass through 10 layers of PR now, we weren't writing jokes. We were writing press releases." The real breaking point, according to multiple whispers, may have been a monologue that never aired. Kimmel allegedly taped a fiery but emotional piece about the state of free expression. Not naming names, not even getting political. Just asking if comedians were still allowed to be funny. That segment was pulled, scrapped completely. A month later, he was gone. But it wasn't just the censorship that bothered Kimmel. It was the silence from the network afterward. No press release, no official farewell, no public thank you for over 2 decades of service. It was as if they wanted him to quietly disappear. Another former staffer said, "The way it happened, the ghosting, the coldness, that's what hurt Jimmy the most. Not the decision itself, but the erasure." Rumors also surfaced about a culture shift within Disney's upper management, one that prioritized brand safety over creative autonomy. Younger executives, fresh from the world of tech and streaming, allegedly had little patience for legacy stars who didn't fall in line. One executive reportedly said in a meeting, "We don't need another Letterman, we need a corporate ambassador with jokes." That didn't sit well with Kimmel. He wasn't trying to be political. He wasn't trying to fight. He was just trying to be himself. But over time, being himself became incompatible with the environment Disney had created. By the time the decision was made to take him off the air, the insiders say Kimmel already knew it was coming. And now, as his fans demand answers and Disney stays quiet, the insiders' voices are getting louder. Not out of bitterness, but out of respect. "He gave everything to that network," one staffer said, "and whether you loved him or hated him, he deserved better than this." As the world continues to digest the news of Jimmy Kimmel's quiet removal from late-night television, one question looms larger than any other. What's next? Kimmel hasn't given any interviews, no official sit-down, no podcast rant, no teary-eyed goodbye. Just a short, cryptic post online. Grateful for the ride? That's it. And for a comedian known for his candor, for speaking his mind even when it rattled the cage, that silence feels intentional. But those closest to him say, the wheels are turning. A shift away from television. Behind the scenes, several entertainment reporters and longtime insiders claim Kimmel may never return to television in the traditional sense. Friends say he's grown tired of the constant battles with executives and network limitations. After 2 decades of being filtered, censored, or second-guessed, he's exploring something new: independent production. One source said, Jimmy's not bitter, but he's done playing the network game. He wants full control. And these days, you don't need a network for that. Whispers have surfaced about a deal with a major podcast network. Not a late-night reboot, not a political tirade, but an honest, free-flowing series where Kimmel gets to speak from the heart about entertainment, comedy, his life, and the world, unfiltered. Others believe he may take a page from the Conan O'Brien playbook, build a media empire from scratch, focused on authenticity, long-form storytelling, and the kind of smart, nuanced comedy networks now fear. Support from unexpected voices. As word spread about his removal, tributes and quiet support began pouring in, not just from celebrities, but from comedians across generations. Even those who once clashed with him sent messages of respect. One younger stand-up wrote, "Jimmy helped open the door for comedians like me. Say what you want about his politics or style, but he fought to keep comedy sharp, even when the rules kept changing." A few old clips have resurfaced in the past week. Kimmel defending young comics. Kimmel tearing up talking about his family. Kimmel joking about the absurdities of fame. In hindsight, they paint a picture not of a divisive figure, but of a man trying to balance relevance, responsibility, and truth in a world that kept moving the goalposts. The legacy. Whether you agreed with him or not, Jimmy Kimmel's run on late-night TV was undeniably historic. He survived changing audiences, evolving platforms, and one of the most divisive decades in American media. He did it with humor. He did it with honesty. And, in the end, he walked away without selling out. And that, in itself, is rare. As this chapter closes, the final message from Kimmel isn't bitterness. It's not revenge. It's gratitude. Gratitude for the fans, for the team, for the moments, for the ride. And maybe, just maybe, we haven't seen the last of him, because some voices, no matter how hard the system tries to silence them, still find a way to be heard.